Excellent. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here and to meet the Focali network. I'd just like to share a sort of brief reflection, maybe also comments or questions to discuss later throughout the day. And I think in many ways we are, of course, living in turbulent times also in terms of sustainability. We see a withdrawal or reluctance to engage with environmental agreements, a lot of opposition to introducing binding rules, and even the SDGs are now considered too strong by some governments, and we see a rollback on reporting and engagement with the SDGs. This is despite the fact that a lot of research has actually shown that the voluntary commitments of the SDGs are not enough. In many ways, at the national level, it looks quite bleak in a lot of places and locations, although not everywhere either. I think the picture is also mixed. But what I would like to do is maybe to use that also as an opportunity to think about things from a different angle and sort of see, are there maybe perspectives that in these difficult times we can develop that were maybe harder to develop earlier on? And one example I'd like to give is from an emerging research agenda that I'm currently developing, which is on just food system transformation. So we know that the current dominant food systems are responsible for the transgression of multiple planetary boundaries, climate change, but also biodiversity loss. And so it's very clear that something needs to change. But what we don't have a consensus on is how do we actually do that? How do we transform food systems? And I think for a long time, much of the research and policy attention has focused on how to make global agricultural supply chains more sustainable. And I think that is really an important topic, and I don't think that we should abandon that. But this focus has also meant that trade was always seen as a central element in dominant agendas on food system sustainability. And yeah, as I said, I think that's really important. But if we have this as the only focus, there is a risk that maybe other potential pathways which can complement food system transformation in really important ways are overlooked. And especially those forms of agricultural production and maybe also those forms of thinking about sustainability in food systems which do not relate to global trade and value chains. And I think this resonates a lot with the global context for different reasons, but that's why I think maybe it's an opportunity rather to rethink perspectives. Because I think with the COVID pandemic on the one hand, but then also the war in Ukraine, we've seen the vulnerability of long commodity chains. And so from a very different angle, there is now also an impetus to think about that. And at the same time, I think consumers, certainly in Europe, but I think also other parts of the world are increasingly looking for locally sourced products and other forms of productions which are not commodities destined for these global markets. And so I would just like to maybe throw that out there in the audience. What kind of opportunities do we have here to maybe think about new questions, new perspectives, for example, on food system transformation, but maybe the same also goes for other areas of sustainability. And I think I will leave it at that, but I'm very happy to have a chat about that in coffee breaks, but also come back to this with a bit more content maybe in the final session. Thank you.
And this really, I think, kickstarted our thoughts. And in the afternoon, we will also, I mean, of course, there are huge challenges, but there are also in these transformations and lot happening that we can see new pathways. And I think you also helped really to bridge the landscape, the food systems and the biodiversity and the forest issues and how we're globally connected, which is really the focus of Focali and our collaboration with Siani. So welcome, and you will be back in the afternoon.